The war in Ukraine has forced us to ask lots of difficult questions of ourselves. Among those are the West's reliance on countries like Russia for energy and how global events can hit us all in the pocket, at the petrol pumps and now every time we turn on the heating. It feels like a political wake-up call, and some might say it's the perfect moment for an opposition party to offer up some bold new ideas. So it's great that Jonathan Reynolds, Labour's Shadow Business Secretary, is with us this morning. Jonathan, thanks so much for joining us on Times Radio.
Good morning, Kate.
Morning. Now let's start with energy. The Business Secretary, your opposite number, has said the government plans to build 7 new nuclear power stations. Does Labour support that?
Yes, nuclear has to be part of our long-term energy security. The price that you can commission a nuclear power station at is really the decision you've got to make. You can't say at any price, but you should be able to, having developed the Hinkley reactor, produce the next set of nuclear reactors at a cheaper cost. And there's some exciting technology in terms of smaller modular reactors as well. But it's only one component. I mean, the big story has to be not further dependence on fossil fuels, but a big push towards nuclear and renewables, but also energy efficiency. British homes still far less efficient than the average housing stock in continental Europe. So it has to be a big comprehensive plan. And the fact that the government still can't even tell us when the strategy will be and can't this morning tell us whether that, for instance, will lift the onshore wind ban, which has got to be part of the solution, I think is a huge problem, because we should have had anyway a plan in place to meet our future energy needs. But when we've got a situation, as you say, as grave as Russia's invasion of Ukraine has produced, this should have been an emergency, a priority for the government.
Now, you said before that we should fast forward nuclear. What does that mean exactly? How many new nuclear power stations and how fast?
Well, it depends on the cost, Kate, that you could commission them at. I mean, nuclear can't, like any form of generation, you've got to have heed to the price that customers will ultimately pay for that. But for instance, we would lift the onshore wind ban, so we'd substantially increase onshore wind capacity. I think we should be looking at trebling offshore wind capacity by 2035 to something like 75 gigawatts. So all of these things have to work together. But you've also got to make sure you're doing that in a fair way. You're giving people incentives to convert their heating to electricity from gas. You're also pursuing things like hydrogen. And that overall comprehensive strategy, as I say, it should have been in place before Ukraine, but it is absolutely vital now. And it seems to me the reason we're not getting the strategy that we need is that the cabinet still can't agree on the fundamental components of that. And that is a massive problem in this position we're in.
Would you be happy to see a new nuclear power station in your constituency, perhaps down the road from you?
Well, yes. I mean, obviously, you tend to build nuclear power stations near the coast, and Greater Manchester's got everything, as we say, except the beach. So it probably wouldn't be the normal location. But I have no hesitation in saying one of the big changes in our energy system, whether that's renewables, onshore wind close to people, or new nuclear power stations, I think we've got to understand that the massive gain we can get here from energy security in terms of security of supply, but also in tackling net zero, is the big prize. And I think people do accept that. I think that's what they want to see. The biggest danger of people's homes would, of course, be to see catastrophic levels of climate change, which would make the future for our children, for our grandchildren, uninhabitable. And that's what people want to see. They want to see progress. And I think they are willing to hear an argument from government about that.
And you've spoken there about offshore wind capacity, but the issue of onshore wind and where to put new wind turbines, that's quite difficult. How many new turbines would Labour like to see?
Well, I think you could lift the ban and you could double our existing capacity. The number of turbines that requires is obviously related to the technology. Technology in offshore wind has come on so much because of the support that's been in place from government to government, and therefore you've seen much more efficient turbines be deployed. But I really think the government are really making a mistake if they believe that onshore wind, which is the cheapest form of new electricity generation, isn't going to be part of the solution to this. You need secure supplies that are renewable, that meet our net zero objectives, but also which are delivered at a cost that means that the burden on consumers, on households, is as light as it can possibly be. And onshore wind and offshore wind are a huge part of that, because they're not just renewable, they're the cheapest price you can produce it at. And I think onshore wind, the public supports the arguments around there, and the government's making a huge mistake, as I say, if they still can't make their minds up about that.
A lot of what we're talking about here is long-term solution to a problem which is hitting lots of people right now. Energy bills increasing across the board, people really struggling, even across the months as they get warmer. What would Labour do short term? I mean, what's the answer to the problem that we're seeing now in terms of, our relationship with Russia, for example, and other countries around the world? How can the UK tackle the energy problem now?
What was required in the spring statement was some real help with energy bills today. These long-term plans are crucial, but what people need is help with the pressure they're facing, whether that's through inflation, higher taxes. So we, of course, wouldn't have put up national insurance, but specifically on energy bills, which are the big issue right now. We, of course, would have levied that windfall tax on the North Sea oil and gas companies. They would still have done very well out of these record prices, but we could have used that money, and we would use that money to give households some real help. So taking VAT off bills, changing around some of the levies that are applied to bills when an energy company goes bust, and fundamentally increasing the scope of what's called warm homes discount in terms of who gets it and the generosity of that. And the result of that would have been £200 off the bill for everyone and £600 off the bill for a third of British households who need the most help. So we had a plan for the short term, have a plan to give people that real help and assistance they need now, but also for the long term in a way that gives us secure energy that meets our net zero objectives and does so at the best possible price. And I think, to be frank, the government have neither of those, neither the short term or the long term plan in place.
You mentioned the warm homes discount there, but to help subsidise those payments for people on low incomes, that's people who earn a little bit more who would still have to pay higher energy bills. So it doesn't solve the problem, does it? It just passes the burden on to another group of people.
Well, it would have been a major piece of assistance. I mean, £600 off an energy bill. Yes, they're rising at record levels, but £600 compared to the paltry offer from the Chancellor, where you're going to be loaned back your own money over 5 years, I think was a real offer and would make a real difference to people.
Yes, but the money for it would come from other energy bill payers. So the bills for many people would still go up.
No, it would come from the windfall tax. So it would come from the windfall tax on the North Sea oil and gas companies by increasing their taxation by 10 percentage points for 12 months, and also use the existing revenue that comes to the exchequer, because VAT is levied on bills, the higher bills go up, the more money comes back to the Treasury. So by combining those things together, we would have been able to give people some real help. As I say, the North Sea oil and gas companies would still be doing very well out of this. They're returning a huge amount of money to shareholders through higher dividends, through share buybacks, and, to be honest, higher executive pay. They would have still done well, but we'd have been able to use that few £billion extra to give people real help that they need on their energy bills. Households and businesses too were included in our plans. And that's what people need right now. And let's not forget, our whole recovery from the pandemic is predicated on people going back out to shops, to services, and spending money. If they can't do that because the cost of living pressures are so extreme, well, the overall position the country will be in will be far, far worse.
So what about nationalising the energy giants then? Is that a good idea?
Well, I don't think that would be the right thing to propose right now. I mean, if you were talking about nationalising the retail companies that supply energy to people, well, that's not where the problem lies. The problem lies in these record gas prices, and therefore a windfall tax that would then give us the capacity, the revenue, the resources to return value to households, to give people real cash support at this time. That is, I think, the right solution to that. I understand there will be, and already have been, many energy companies that the government shouldn't have allowed into the energy market because they weren't hedged enough, they weren't secure enough, and they've gone out of business, and that cost has been passed back to consumers. So the energy market will look different at the end of this, and we'll have to look at what the long-term solution to that is. But right now, when there's a problem like the record energy bills people are facing, as a politician, an opposition politician, you've got to give people a real costed plan that would give them some real help. And that's what our windfall tax plan does, along with that reduction in VAT, changes to warm homes discount, and changes to how some of those levies work. It'd be real help to people. That's what I think we're right to focus on.
Should we be rationing our energy?
No, I mean, that would be a disaster for households and for businesses. But to be honest, the fact you're even asking the question is an indictment of Conservative energy policy for the last decade, and the fact that we still haven't had a plan from the government, even though they said it was, to them, a priority and an emergency. If they were to follow what we've put forward, so focus on energy efficiency, on expanding and changing onshore wind in terms of the ban they've got in place, further work on solar, tidal, offshore wind, and new nuclear, that would be a comprehensive plan for the future. And at the same time, if they followed our plans for a windfall tax, that would give households and businesses the real support they need in the short term too.
Jonathan Reynolds, Shadow Secretary of State for Business and Industrial Strategy, thank you very much.
Thank you.